In the end, Serico surprised him. Under Alicia as Wren's guidance, he somehow managed to clear out several unused rooms and decorate them to a level of perhaps not elegance, but at least appearance of deliberateness. The choices felt a bit eclectic, of course. Velvina ended up with the room used to dry herbs. They'd apparently debated and decided to leave the bunches of feverfew and rue and wolfsbane hanging from the rafters. The smell was pleasant enough, at least, and the bedspread had been thoroughly embroidered by a now familiar hand. A border of moat squid cheerfully squeezing the life out of tiny villagers was a nice touch. The bed frame itself looked suspiciously like the mayor's, but Gav wasn't going to question. Oh, it's too warm. Hang on. It's raining, so you wouldn't think it's too warm, but it is. Right, let's see it. We can proceed now. Zaxus would be in the potting shed in the kitchen garden. Gav figured that he'd like the garden. They quickly replaced the rotting beams and the yellowing vines that crawling all over the structure would hopefully feel homelike to him. The wall backed up against the kitchen to keep seedlings warm in the early spring, so at least the temperature was cozy enough. Garbeetle had added Gav's ambalic set for visual interest. Gav hoped the man didn't take it as an invitation to blow them all up by accident. No one had wanted to offend Zarakonar. Gav's bed no longer really fit in his own bedchamber now that the contents of the workshop had been piled all around. Serico had swallowed nervously before confessing that he had had the bed frame disassembled and carried down to the audience chamber, setting it up in the dais in place of the throne. Gav himself would be sleeping on a pallet for the duration. Gav had startled Serico by clapping him heartily on the back and congratulating him on his design sense. The glowering bed looked much more in proportion to the larger throne room, and he fancied that it would appeal to Zarakonar's sense of self-importance, as would the knowledge that Gav had been displaced, should he figure it out. Anything to make Zarakonar believe Gav had thoroughly given up and showed no threat was fine by Gav. Besides, he actually found himself looking forward to sleeping on the sweet-smelling pallet of hay instead of the dusty, brooding featherbed of doom. The assorted servants and hangers-on would indeed be in the stable mews kitchen kennels. But there, too, the trio of Serico, Orla, and Alicia had impressed him. The place had been cleaned until it gleamed, and the distinctive scent of more newly mown hay indicated fresh, if hastily thrown together, pallets. They had hung paper lanterns, which Garbeetle had cut into fanciful and only moderately threatening patterns, giving the area a festive air. Hung curtains to make little rooms so that each sleeper might have a bit of privacy. If they chose to share those rooms or take advantage of some of the equipment, Gav did not want to know. Velvina, while taking every opportunity to smile condescendingly and flirt discomfortingly, was basically everything that moved, proved surprisingly helpful. She seemed to find the whole exercise in domesticity a novel amusement, as long as she was appealed to as a gracious example guest rather than a female who should simply know things. As for Fiari and Alicia as Alicia, Gav did not talk to the princess, although he did quietly have Fiari moved into her cell for his own protection. He tried hard not to even think about them. The last thing in the world he wanted was for Velvina to get curious. So by the following afternoon, while they were not ready, they were as ready as they were going to be. Outside the castle walls, he could hear the nearly rhythmic thumping of a band composed of wandering bards who had clearly never performed together before. Serico had taken the opportunity of the lull to slip down and sing with them. Wren had reported that he was, at least from the castle wall, really quite good. Better than the bards, certainly. The festival was in full swing. The castle smelled of herbs and hay, and the smells of a feast being prepared had almost started to overpower the wafts of garlic from the village. Gav took a breath and allowed himself to pretend, for one moment, that maybe everything would be all right. The unearthly scream from the sky above the castle broke that quite effectively. Very abruptly, everything was still. The music cut off. The dull roar of voices he hadn't even been aware that he could hear until that moment stopped. The scream shattered the air once more. Gav was already moving towards the gate. He could hear in the distance people screaming. Whether it was, "Oh heavens, what was that noise?" panic, or, "Ah, the monster here is eating us! The pain, mercy, sweet gods, the pain!" panic, he could not tell. At the third cry, he dropped any pretense at dignity and gathered his robes above his knees and flat out ran. The human screaming did not seem to get worse, even as the periodically terrifying, monstrous screaming got closer. By the time he had made it to the drawbridge, he could make out the source of the noise, not that he could identify it. It flew on enormous ragged wings, webbed like a bat, with sparkling phoenix tail trailing behind. 2 heads bobbed with the effort. Occasionally one would snap at the other, causing the other to complain with that distinctive, ear-shredding cry. Gav had difficulty determining the size of the creature beating its way through the clouds without anything next to it to provide as a reference. When it came close enough for him to make out the 2 tiny human figures, each straddling the base of a respective neck, he swallowed hard. Fortunately, the distance gave him enough time to slow back down to a dignified walk before he reached the edge of town. He hoped, rather desperately, that they did not attempt to put down in the square. He wasn't at all confident that the monster would fit. He answered no questions as he crossed through the town itself to the opposite side. Far more people than he felt comfortable with followed him. He was relieved, however, to see that both Valvina and Serico made it. The monster circled the town and the castle one full time. He waved with more jauntiness than he felt. For a moment, his heart nearly stopped when he thought it might consider the tower itself as a perch. But it continued back around. It finally came in for a landing, on the far side of the village, the backdraft from its wings forcing everyone to clutch tightly at hats and robes. Scaly claws dug into the freshly harvested field, and then the creature collapsed, wings flopping down outspread, chest plowing into the ground, followed by one head and then the other. The first head raised itself back up a few feet, mewled pitifully, and then crashed back down, the great eyes glazing over. "Well, I suppose the 2 heads were too much of a strain for its heart after all," Zaxxas called down cheerfully. "But what do you think of the overall design?"